Leaders Live. We are here at Microsoft's office at 11 Times Square at the Networking event. We got a special guest today, Michael J. Wieser, venture lawyer, co-owner of Westchester Angels. We're going to be talking a little bit about seed investments, angel investments, and before we kind of get into that, let's get some context of who you are. And just a little background. The reason why we're doing this again is to understand how business leaders operate so that we could understand what they're trying to grow with and collaborate with them, and then we could all work together, and I could hopefully connect you with the right people, like-minded individuals, and it's a little bit more authentic. We could grow together, and we could all work together, hopefully. You know what I mean? So context behind Michael. Let's give a little bit of the background, right? You're an investor now, you're a venture lawyer, you're a hot shot, you're doing big things. But this all started as a beer vendor.
Yeah.
You were a beer vendor, you were doing a lot of different things. Like, give us some background where you started from.
Right. So you know, I trace my entrepreneur spirit back to when I was a teenager. I was lucky enough to get a job as a beer vendor at Nassau Coliseum, Madison Square Garden, and Jones Beach Concerts. And the great thing about being a beer vendor is that you make pure commission, 15% of whatever you sell. So I really quickly learned that a couple of tricks, you know. So you know, you learn crowd mentality, you hustle, you make money, and you know, in a 2-hour evening, I'd be watching the Islanders win the Stanley Cup, or Bon Jovi doing a concert, and making like $200 as a 15-year-old when my friends were working for minimum wage, and I'm like, you know what, this entrepreneurship thing is pretty cool. So when you're sitting by yourself in the front row of Madison Square Garden with 20,000 empty seats, watching your rock band idols like just do their sound checks, pretty cool stuff. So I often say that no matter where my career takes me, that first job was the best job I've ever had. So it really made me an entrepreneur. What was interesting after that is that even through college, I pierced girls' ears for money. I was a carnival barker for money. So I was always doing these entrepreneurial things. And then I went to law school, and I had the blessing and the curse of doing very well at law school, which meant that I got one of those big corporate law jobs. And if you're familiar with big corporate law, there's nothing less entrepreneurial than being a lawyer in a big corporate law firm. You know, that spirit was in me, and it led to a lot of steps after that.
What did you learn from that hustle of carnival barking and, you know, showmanship at the garden, right, flipping beers, getting people drunk off commissions?
Well, it was all about engagement. You know, I think that we all know that if you're people like to buy from people that they know, like, and trust, and no matter whether it's you sitting at the bottom of the row yelling "beer here" and just making a funny joke, and then having people look at you, like if you yell, you know, well, there's a whole bunch of things in the whatever, but it's all about engagement, right? It's all about crowd, you know, basically connecting with people, and that cuts across everything that you do in business. If you can engage and connect with people, you're going to have success.
And that probably applies to pitching as well, right?
Yeah. A big part of pitching is, you know, as much as you might be a master technician at whatever your craft is, pitching is its own sort of skill that you need to have. And one thing I would say to founders here is, if you're not comfortable doing the public speaking, then, you know, there's no shame in having someone from your team who is comfortable doing it, doing the pitch, because it's that personal connection that you get with your audience that is going to lead to potentially getting the funding that you want. So you just need to know, you know, recognizing yourself whether that's something you're comfortable doing. You know, you might be the greatest, web developer or you know, programmer in the world, but if you can't, you know, draw a crowd in and make them excited about what you're trying to pitch to them, you're not serving your company well.
Yeah, solid. We had Serge Millman on Startup Ventures recently, and he was talking about having a well-rounded team. So if you're so focused on tech, you probably want a salesman as well and have that balance so that you can pitch together. Let's work our way into what you're doing now, which is a lot. And you got the investments, you got the legal practice. You know, walk us through as well, and Westchester Angels, the investments. But let's talk about, what you're doing now.
Okay, so one of the things that differentiates me as a lawyer, I'll start with the law part, is that I do have a background that I've founded 6 different businesses over the years. Most of them were, what you might call lifestyle businesses. They weren't these, big growth businesses, although I did have a multi-million-dollar mobile tech company. The reason why that's important to me is that while I was still practicing law as general counsel and doing legal work, it really informed me as to what the sort of difficulties are with small companies working with lawyers, right? So when I sort of did this iteration of my law practice, I previously was a corporate lawyer, I was an entertainment lawyer, rock and roll lawyer. That was a lot of fun, but low ceiling in terms of my success. But being on the tour bus was a lot of fun. In this iteration, I saw 2 weaknesses in the legal market. The first being is that small companies, startup companies, early stage companies, have a hard time working with a lawyer because of the billing model that most law firms practice. Unlike other industries that have converted into managed services or software as a service, where there's a recurring revenue and you have a scope of work, and you can work on a manageable, repeatable, funded basis, lawyers practice mostly with this break-fix model. So it's like, all right, put a couple $1,000s on ice and an escrow, and then I'm going to charge you a minute at a time, and you don't want to talk to your lawyer. It's not collaborative because, who wants to have a 20-minute phone call and have to pay a couple $100 to basically just validate what you were thinking before the call anyway.
It's tough to break down the trust.
Right, exactly. So I kind of do things a little differently. I try to do like a managed legal services model where we do a scope of work and we basically try to work with me as part of the team. So that's one differentiator. The other big problem I saw in the legal market is that lawyers, 99% of them, only are concerned with protecting their clients and covering their butt. But they don't see law as a way of implementing business strategy. When I had my mobile tech company, we had these consultants, and they'd come once a month for $5,000. They were the smartest people in the world. They'd walk in the door, they'd spend half a day, they'd show us their genius, and then they'd walk out the door, and 30 days would go by, and then they'd come in and, what did you do in the last 30 days? Well, we played whack-a-mole and put out a lot of fires, but we didn't really implement anything. And I had this aha moment, which is, what better way is there to implement business strategy than every time you have an engagement with one of your stakeholders, a client, a strategic partner, it gives you the opportunity to implement business strategy with your contract. So maybe it's you implementing some new recurring revenue model or some new revenue streams or some other way of improving the value of your company. If you improve the value of your company and make it more valuable, then you attract investors and you attract strategic partners and you have a sort of a better story. So the way I like to practice law is to do it with a business person's mindset. It's not just about covering your butt. It's how do we use these legal practices to implement business strategy. And that's the other thing that differentiates me on the legal side. I am very fortunate that actually 2 of my colleagues at Westchester Angels are here right now, Jeff Lair and Jody Chesnoff. And we basically have this great investment group where, and I'll be talking about that in the presentation, but what I wanted to do is become part of a community. And the investor community, whether it's the early stage companies on one side of the table or the accredited investors, angels on the other side of the table, it's just a great atmosphere to be in. What I realized is that your 401k is not very exciting. Right? So you have all of these people that have a lot of money parked in these like safe investments. Why not take a little piece of it, 5%, 10%, and really get excited? Because the one thing that's great about the angel investor world is that we like to say it's smart money. People are not investing because they're looking for a, fixed return on their investment. They're looking to be part of something. And what angel investors do is they're not only just providing funding, but they also have 2 other very valuable resources. One is the connections that they have, their Rolodex, if you're familiar with what a Rolodex is. I know that's ancient, but basically their connections.
It's on LinkedIn.
Right. And number 2 is their expertise. And so we have individual investors who have had successful careers in a particular industry, they get excited about cutting a check to a company in that industry because they can walk them into doors and that they never would have had before. And just one other story there is very interesting to us too, is that sometimes we have these founders who come to us and they had a huge successful exit. They had sold their company for $100 million 2 years ago. And they're at our group asking for $500,000. So we say, why are you here? Why aren't you just writing the check yourself? And the interesting thing is that they all say the same thing. It's like, my team is going to tell me what I want to hear. When I come and I present to you, you pick at all the scabs, you tell me all the warts, you get in my face, and you make me a better business person. So it's fun to be part of that environment.
You talked about the law firm and the collaborations and helping these companies grow, and I think that's a natural segue to Westchester Angels as well, because you're building a stronger network, like you said, you're placing them all in. How do you grow your particular network and collaborate with others to make a better, stronger team?
Well, I think everybody who's here tonight is part of a business community. That's why you're here tonight. And the one thing that, one of the great quotes that I love is Woody Allen, who says that 80% of success is just showing up. And the thing is that, I'll go to networking events and then I'll leave and I'll be like, I didn't really achieve all that much. And, I didn't really plan it that great and whatever. But if you just keep showing up, it's amazing those kind of collaborations and those kind of relationships that you build. There are several people here that are here because I told them about this event. And all of them came to me from just random relationships. Someone that I met at some event 3 years ago that all of a sudden calls me up. So, the one thing about being a founder, being an entrepreneur, is it could be a very lonely life, right? You're basically, if you're one person shop and the Starbucks isn't very stimulating, right? But the thing is that if you stay out in the community and you make those connections and you develop those relationships, it just has an exponential effect on the kind of things you build. Right. I mean, here's a great example. I had met some client through just some random thing, and then they introduced me to Mike Mara, the head of Entra, this organization, and I came and did a panel, and we actually met 6 months ago doing that, and now here I am sitting here, and it was all from one very, very minor sort of handshake that I did at some random event.
Right.
So in terms of you got to be out there, be part of the community, and those things will start to happen.
The types of verticals that you're investing in at Westchester Angels, tech, I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff. Can you talk about that and what you're looking for so that people can understand what you're looking to invest in, and people on LinkedIn as well that may be able to reach out to you? Okay, great.
Well, the one thing about Westchester Angels is we are industry agnostic. We don't sort of rule out any particular industries. Our only criteria is some kind of nexus to the New York City market. We want to help our community and build, so you basically, if you could hop on a commuter train and be in the city within an hour and a half, then you're part of our target. I would say that the type of group we are and the type of industries that are prevalent here in the New York market tend to be software, apps. So there's a lot of technical things, there's a lot of consumer goods, there are a lot of business-to-business services. It's not like Shark Tank where everything is a widget that can go online and be in a supermarket, you know what I mean? It's much more, it's much more business-oriented, but I tend to think that most of the stuff is most of the things that come to us are tech, but we've invested across a whole bunch of different industries. I wouldn't rule anything out in particular.
And what excites you? You're trying to get into right now. I mean, is there anything in particular that just good investments?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's any. I mean, there's always certain industries that are really the hot thing on the corner. I mean, a couple of years ago there was a new frozen yogurt place in every corner. Then there was a new burger place in every corner. Lately, it's all about blockchain and cannabis and whatnot. I don't really go for the sort of fad type of stuff. It's more of the foundation of the company and whether they have a business model that makes a lot of sense and a team that is exciting to be about. I mean, they could be selling the most, unsexy type of product or service, but if they can show the roadmap that's believable, that goes from point A to point B, and we could see that as value, we're all ears. So I wouldn't say that we're like, oh, we're looking for that next, B2B artificial intelligence platform that you scrapes the internet to create blah, blah, blah. I've heard that 1,000 times.
We're going to take some questions from the crowd in just a bit, and some questions from LinkedIn in just a second. But you talked about that foundation. What are some of the characteristics of these leaders that you see that stand out to you, maybe when they pitch to you? Because again, you mentioned the team is key. What are the characteristics that you see that you'd like to invest in as well?
Okay, so the first thing is that keep in mind that we invest in businesses, not in ideas. So you could have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't show that you're actually taking that idea and put together a business plan around it to move forward, we like to see companies that have some traction, that need some sort of gasoline to move it further along. So that's important. Having a leader, a founder, or a team that knows where they need help and knows their weaknesses is important. When people come and lecture us on and they know everything, then that's a problem. But at the same time, you want somebody that has the confidence to move forward. The one thing that I would say is that even if you're a small team or even a single founder, you still need to check off boxes. So one of the things that I would say is that whether or not you have all of certain boxes checked, you need to have somebody in the form of maybe a board of advisors or something that can fill in those blanks. So for instance, we see a lot of companies that are tech founders and they're great, maybe they're the best developer or coder out there, but they're basically trying to apply code into an industry that they have zero experience in and nobody in their team that's part of that industry. That's sort of a turnoff for us. We want them to, there's 2 or 3 different hats that need to be worn. You need somebody with a sales and marketing pedigree. You need someone with an operations pedigree. You want someone who's in that particular industry that's got some leadership there. So even if you clearly in the beginning you don't have the funds to hire top people, it's amazing how collaborative some of these advisors could be, because it's just an exciting place to be, particularly for some of these people that have been in-house in a corporate environment for many years. They actually embrace the opportunity to be a mentor, to be a leader, and to lend their name to an opportunity. So just make sure that you think of these different areas, and when an angel investor asks you, well, what are you doing about this, that you've got, you're not the expert in everything, but you've got someone who can talk to them.
Solid gems all around. Josiah, what do we got coming in with the comments, and then we'll take a few questions from the crowd too.
Yeah, I was thinking we could go straight into the crowd, take some questions for you. So if you guys have questions, I'd love to get some questions from people here.
Yeah, if you got a question, just speak up in any
awesome.
sort of way.
Yeah, and I'll come to you.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Let me get this mic in your face, and then we can go.
Look at that. We got the mic moving.
How do you think about pre-revenue companies versus revenue companies? Are you looking, you'd mentioned traction. Is traction with users sufficient in some cases, or are you purely looking for revenue traction?
Well, I mean, obviously everything's a case-by-case basis. Clearly, if revenue is validation, right? So if people are willing to spend money and buy it, even in an early stage, that's great validation. However, if you've got comparables in the marketplace that you can sort of point to, and a lot of industries don't necessarily even have the opportunity of revenue early on, particularly if it's like a medical device or something that needs FDA approval. So it doesn't rule it out, but it's a lot less risky if you basically are already on a chart with a upward trajectory on that hockey stick, and then it's like this much money can get you there. When you're on the flat part in the bottom, it's a much bigger leap of faith. So I wouldn't close the door on anything like that, but it's certainly going to help a lot if you have some revenue.
Pretty good. Anybody else got something going on? How about you're a venture lawyer, you're dealing with a lot of startups. What are common pitfalls that you see that people can avoid?
Okay. One of the most important things is to realize that the pitch that you do and the excitement that you generate is not the end. That's just the beginning. Your goal in a pitch, your goal in sort of taking this sort of process is to just get to the next conversation. And the exciting thing, or the thing that you really need to be wary of, is that you need to realize that if you get a angel investor or group excited, they're going to do due diligence. Right? So due diligence, which I'll talk a little bit about in a little while, but due diligence falls into 3 categories. You've got operations, finance, and law. And when they lift the hood to see what the engine looks like, you better be ready, because a lot of times you only get one bite at the apple. So one of the things that I run into quite a bit is companies that everything's a handshake and they haven't been formal about their structure, and they haven't put together the right agreements with people that they work with or with the co-founders, and before you know it, they don't stand up to due diligence, and it's a problem. So the one thing is that there are certain foundational elements across all those different due diligence categories that you really need to be mindful and be taken care of before you go to the market. You need to basically make sure that if you're lucky enough to get someone's interest and they're interested in looking at you, that you've taken the steps you need to have a solid business in place.
You talked about, like, instead of just a handshake, and I think that the ask is probably one of the toughest parts, you're right, to get to that next step.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any advice on how to get that handshake into a written agreement? Because that's an awkward conversation for a lot of people.
Right.
And it just asking for whatever it is, it's kind of tough. But do you have a tip on how to do that?
Yeah.
How to progress?
Well, okay. So I'm going to just sort of change that just a little bit.
Good.
In saying that, one of the biggest downfalls for all of the pitches that we see, and I'll, my partners will definitely agree, is that remember that you're not pitching your widget, your service, your goods. You're pitching an investment. And what happens very often is that we'll do, let's say in a 10-minute pitch, 9.5 minutes is all about the product, the app, the service. But the one thing is that you have to know your audience.
Right.
And your audience is interested in giving you $1 today and getting $20 back 3 to 5 years from now. So if you don't show them the path and what you're selling is not your widget. What you're selling is this opportunity to invest and this return and this money, how fast, how much, what's my risk. That's what you're selling. So it's not so much getting that in writing, but just understanding who your audience is. And I'll give you one quick example of that too. I had one of these people I was working with did a pitch to a very large angel group, and her product was basically the way she presented it was a social media app for millennials, and she was pitching to a room full of old gray-haired guys. And instead of saying that, oh, you can meet somebody to play golf with when you're on vacation, she said, oh, when you're basically hanging out at a club and you want to meet someone, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to know who your audience is. So you just make sure that that's part of your strategy there.
That's good. That's good. It's a gem. As we wrap up, can you leave us off with possibly your words to live by, like a mantra or ethos you kind of pass along to everybody?
Okay. There's one. I said my whole 80% is just showing up thing, but there's 2 other sort of mantras or sayings that I've lived my whole life by. One is that, and this is the entrepreneurial spirit, it's a lyric from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and basically the lyric is that I'd rather regret the things that I've done than the things that I haven't done. So a lot of times, it's safe to not do things, and a lot of people are going to sort of be whispering negativity in you, whatever. But if you believe in something, the time to do it is now, because the one thing that's interesting, and I work with a lot of startups, is that nobody hits stride until they're in business for a couple of years, right? Mm-hmm. And the only thing that's going to delay you from being successful is not starting.
Right.
Because you're not going to have the answers in the beginning, so you might as well just start, and then as you sort of progress, that's great. So that's one thing. And the other thing I like to say, and I think this is really about accountability, is don't fix the blame, fix the problem. Right? So as an employer, when I had companies and whatever, if somebody came to me and just had excuses, that wasn't good. I need them to basically say, listen, I messed up, but this is how I'm going to fix it, right? And it's all about accountability. We live in a society now where everybody's always looking to blame someone else and whatever. So be accountable to yourself, be accountable to your partners, to your clients, be accountable. And I think that's the most important thing.
A question for the LinkedIn community and anybody who's here too that you could leave off for them. I think we were talking about it a little bit before. With Branson, you want to talk about that? But yeah, a question so that it's just a little hack. If people are watching to the end of the show and they want to follow up with you, they can answer this question.
We were just talking about a funny situation that happened recently to me. I was at an event. Some of you may be familiar with Toastmasters. I'm not a sort of a member of that, but I happened to go to this event, and I went up on stage, and they basically said, "Okay, without any preparation, here's the question, who, dead or alive, would you most like to meet?" And this is about 2 months ago. And I said, without hesitation, I've been saying this forever, I'm like, you know what? I really want to meet Sir Richard Branson. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, he's just like the coolest guy ever, right? I used to be a music lawyer. He was just amazing to me since I was young. And I thought he was really cool. And I gave this whole 5-minute speech all about Richard Branson, how much I admired him. And then like 2 weeks later, I was meeting with a client at a hotel on Central Park South, and Richard Branson walked in the door. And I had the chance to go up to him, shake his hand, talk to him, tell him how much I admired him. So I don't know if that's like sort of a path to follow, but the thing is, if you put good things out in the world and you're out in the business world and doing things, strange things happen. And so if you have a dream and you want it to happen, it's not going to happen if it just stays up here. Start talking about it. You never know what might happen.
Yes.
You might get lucky that way.
That's awesome. So if you whoever you want to meet, put it out there. Tag them on LinkedIn, and then you'll probably meet them. That's how it works.
At some point or another.
That's it, guys. I appreciate your time. We're going to wrap this up. And if you want to get in the loop to see the investor deck, you should be at the Entre event. Join the Entre.com and follow them on Instagram and everywhere else. Appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Run it down.
Shake it down.